My name is Marc Schweigert. With me, I'll introduce a bunch of folks who are participating as well. This is this month's what we call the Power Platform Pro / Code First Developer Office Hours. I just realized I put April and it's May, so hey, I'm winning already. But this is the May edition, even though it says April. I'm not gonna real time edit it. We will do some general housekeeping and then we will get started. If you want to start putting questions, if you haven't picked up on this in the announcements and on our site, I leave the AMA tool open. It's been open since the last office hours, so folks are more than welcome to just come back in here, add questions, vote things up, etc. And the way we run these is once we get to the AMA section, I will go ahead and just answer based on the most voted up questions, right? Community votes count here. And so I kind of quickly go through the format. Generally, what we want to do is spend about anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes on some updates from various folks in the product group at Microsoft within Power Platform. And then we just open it up to AMA. And I'll talk a little bit about AMA. There are some rules of the road with this AMA. This is not a personal support hotline call, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit. But today we'll talk about the Build Conference a little bit. I'll give some brief updates, and I'm sure Andrew and others might chime in as well about some of our monthly tools releases. We've got a nice little surprise. We've got Peter talking about test engine and the roadmap. So as you're listening into these things, feel free to have the AMA tool open and start asking questions based on what you're hearing. We'll certainly welcome people to raise their hand in the middle. For example, when Peter is presenting, I am recording. So if you don't want to be on video or you don't want to be recorded, now is the time to mute yourself or take yourself off of video. Reminder: we do have a Discord. So if you're interested in that, truth be told, I've not been on Discord in a few weeks. Shame on me, I need to get better at that, but we're trying to get more people from the product group, paying attention, listening in, and responding to things on Discord. What are these office hours, right? As I mentioned, it's members of the Power Platform product group across all different parts of Power Platform coming together, talking under the umbrella of, topics that we think are of interest to folks who come from a professional development background and or use code first extensibility of the Power Platform. This is not an NDA session. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the term NDA, it's non-disclosure agreement. There are lots of you on this call who have NDAs. Please do not bring up NDA topics because we cannot answer them and we will pretend what you're asking about isn't real. So just the opposite of an NDA session, you can take pictures, you can tweet or X or whatever it's called these days. You can post on LinkedIn, whatever you want with this information, share it with your coworkers. Again, this is really intended to be a forum to learn about what's new and have conversations not only with the product group, but with your peers of shared interest. Occasionally, not this month, but we will do polls to influence feature investments. And this is a regular forum for you to ask questions. In what we call an AMA or an Ask Me Anything style. You can, even if you want to, raise feature requests. I will tell you, if you put a feature request in the AMA tool, my standard answer is going to be, please go to this GitHub repo and put it on that repo, socialize it, get your friends and coworkers to vote it up, and then let's have a conversation through discussions on GitHub. This happens every third Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. PST. So far, we've got not a whole lot of interest in changing the time, so we're going to stick with it. It's really important to understand what these are not. This is not an introduction to these topics. It's really intended to be a forum for people who understand pro or code first developer topics related to Power Platform. If you're looking for a primer, please go to our Learn material. This is not custom troubleshooting, so please don't ask us to debug your specific issue on GitHub or those sorts of things. We'll just redirect you to GitHub or Microsoft support, depending on the circumstance. Please don't ask us questions about things like licensing or questions about general things that aren't related to pro dev topics. While certainly we'll do our best to answer some of those questions if we can, it's really not the intent of this forum. We respect and understand that sometimes people are eager to just have an opportunity to talk to the folks who build the product at Microsoft, and so they just want to ask whatever's on their mind. But we do ask you that you keep this focus to the purpose of the office hours. If you're on the call, then you probably figured out how to get here already. But for your friends who may not be on the call but want to join in the future, if you go to our GitHub repo, there is an ICS that you can download and just add to your calendar. And then you'll have it on your calendar in perpetuity, and you'll never need to register, and you won't forget. I won't go through all the names here, but it just kind of the theme of this office hours is that we're trying to bring the subject matter experts, the product owners across Power Platform to these calls, such that when you ask a question, it's not me or Marcel trying to fake our way through an answer of a topic that we're not subject matter experts on. It's really, hey, Marcel, can you answer that? Hey, Andrew, hey, Scott, I know you know something about that. What are your thoughts there, right? And so we're bringing folks from Power Apps, Power Automate, from the pipelines team. Now, some of these people won't always be on this call because we all have customer meetings and other scheduling conflicts, but as much as possible, we try to invite many people across not only product, but patterns and practices and guidance, our documentation teams from the Learn platform, the Power Pages team, et cetera. And we will just keep recruiting people to participate in these office hours as certain questions arise. The other thing that I try to do is when we don't get questions answered, I try to hunt down the answers for the next office hours. And so hopefully I've got some of that for you this month as well. And indication of the tool, some of the questions that are still top voted. I'm not the subject matter expert on them, but I've at least tried to get some answers for you. All right, with that, the Build Conference is coming up, so we are going to be light on announcements because most of what we want to talk about, we can't talk about until next week. So I would encourage folks to pay attention to the Build Conference. It is available for streaming. So if I open up my browser here and you just go to build.microsoft.com, that's where you need to go to watch the streaming sessions and the recorded sessions after next week. But we, a lot of us have what we hope are some exciting announcements to share at the conference. So certainly stay tuned. There may be some things that got into the release wave notes a little early that are being covered at the Build Conference. That might be a little bit of a hint. We won't be answering questions on those because we don't want to steal the thunder on the Build Conference. We will acknowledge them if they're in the release notes, but say, hey, wait for Build to learn more. Monthly updates. So one of the things that I promised last month is to get the developer tools page on Learn updated with our release notes. So I'm just going to use that as my launching place. So all of the, where applicable, we have release notes now, and even in the developer tools, if you scroll down, we have release notes for the DevOps tasks and the GitHub Actions. And so if, for example, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want to highlight a few things. There was some feedback on GitHub, and this actually was feedback that I had given the team before I joined the team. So Andrew was kind enough to let me do some PRs, and so I added for Solution Sync the ability to use map XML now, which means when you unpack things using Pack Solution Sync and Pack Solution Clone, it will skip build artifacts that already have code first representations based on definitions in your CDS proj file and your map XML. There are a number of enhancements. One of the biggest ones I'll call out is some really great work Andrew and Crash and team have been doing around supporting what's called workload identity federation, both in Pack CLI as well as in the build tools and the GitHub Actions. And if you're not familiar with this, you might be familiar with OpenID Connect, right? And if you're not familiar with either of them, it is a mechanism which allows you to use identity for your service principal that doesn't require you storing a secret, right, and having to rotate that secret through a trust federation relationship. And so this is part of our security push at Microsoft and ensuring that people can continue to go passwordless or secretless in secure ways. And so hopefully you find some of these of interest. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all the updates here because I really want to let Peter get to what he's about to talk about, but you can follow links to all of these release notes. And certainly while you're listening to people talk, poke through the release notes, ask questions in the AMA tool, and we're happy to answer any of those questions. All right. What do we have next? Mystery. Oh, that's not the PowerPoint. All right. Monthly updates we did. Test engine. So there have been questions the last 2 office hours about test engine. And I want to first recognize Peter and Andrew and a number of other people who've been helping out to really double down our focus and our direction with test engine. As many of you know, if you've been paying attention to the test engine repo, there hasn't been a commit in the repo for quite a while. If you're paying attention to the test engine repo, you may see some PRs and commits happening. That's because we're actively working on test engine again. We have what we think is a fairly robust roadmap for test engine. And just candidly, we're sharing this roadmap with you super, super early. So you probably have a lot of questions that we don't have answers to yet. The test engine plans are so hot off the press, they actually didn't make it into the build conference. And literally, Peter and Andrew and others, we've been scrambling feverishly late last night and early this morning to tinker with some builds that actually show some of this stuff in action. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Peter to give us an update on test engine.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which of course is the test engine. So seismic changes are happening here. These are not just evolutions of what we had that I'm going to present to you today. So I'm very pleased with that. So as Mark said, we are now in a position where we are further developing. We are starting development again on the test engine. It still lives on the GitHub site that you would expect it to be at. If you go there, you will notice, as Mark said, that we haven't really done a lot in the last several months. There still is an issues thing there. So when you use it, if you have any issues, I urge you to put in your issues there. But let's just recap what that thing, unchanged as it is allows you to do. So you can execute tests that are contained in YAML files for Canvas apps only. So what you can do is you can go into your studio when you're building your Canvas apps, and then you can, in that workflow at the same time, you can record tests and you can execute those tests and see what the results are. And then as it happens, you can export these YAML files, that I'll be talking about in a few minutes. And we even have some testing, some support where you can take a link that you can get from Studio and put it into pipeline so that you can execute tests from there. Now we have to, as an organization like Microsoft, we have to emphasize the importance of testing. Testing is really paramount to everything we do because it's the only way that we can catch regressions that happen when we do development. This is true for Microsoft, and I'm guessing it's true for everybody else as well. In fact, we at one point in the application of the, in the application that I have worked with on the financials and operations thing, at some point we had 1 line of application code that was tested by 3 lines of test code. That's how serious we are about testing. And we cannot overestimate the importance of these tests. And that's why we're building what we're going to talk about here. So if you haven't used it yet, it's perfectly usable. It's out there. You can do interesting stuff with it. I believe we have about 200 tests run every day now. So it actually has seen some uptake from our customers. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. All right, so let's take a look at this this figure here to understand the story a little bit better. So central to all of this is this YAML file that I keep talking about. So that's why it's at the center of this particular illustration, that little icon there with a YAML in it. So we have several stories how that YAML can come into being. One of the stories is the test studio that I just talked about, where you can, as you go along developing your app, at the same time you can do test creation at the same time. And there's a button that says export YAML file. So that's certainly one way that you can build these things interactively. Another approach is using an editing experience inside VS Code, where you can edit these YAML files in a sort of a high quality editing experience that knows about the schema of the YAML that you are editing. And at some point, we will also have support for IntelliSense of the power effects that we put in there. So that's going to be sort of like more a pro dev-like story. And then, of course, we have a Copilot story, or will have a Copilot story, where all the work sort of goes away. All you need to do is to explain what the test is supposed to do, and then that YAML file will be created for you just like that. And I have a little demo for that shows how that works a little bit later, if I if it chooses to work at that time. All right, so the YAML sample is below here, and then how is this consumed? Well, it's consumed by the test engine, obviously, right? And when it runs its test, it says, okay, I'm going to run this test, this test, this test in sequence. And whenever one of those steps fails, it'll log that and produce what's known as a TRX file. That is an industry standard that defines the outcomes of these tests. And those we have an experience inside Studio that is able to show you the results. That's what you can see on that illustration there. So that's basically the flow of things. So in the next few slides, we'll be talking more about the internals of this test engine that we have. Go ahead, next slide, please, Mark. Okay, I just wanted to show you an example of what this YAML looks like and what the structure is. So basically what you do in that YAML file is you define yourself a test suite. It has a name and a description and the persona who's executing it. And the app that you actually want to run. In this case, it's a Canvas app. Then you have your number of test cases that each have a name. And then there's a number of test steps involved. And these test steps are what is actually executed, and they're formulated in Power Effects. So here on the first, we have a test case called default check. And the test steps are take a screenshot, put it in this file, then assert that the number label text is 100. And if it isn't, then output this message, validate, blah, 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 and so on. And there's any number of test cases, test steps in a particular test case. And then there's some administrative trivia that I won't be describing just now that talks about what browser to use, what locale the user is running in, and stuff like that, which we won't really get to describe right now. Next slide, please. So what we did is this. So what we did was we took, let's see. So over here in the United States, we have a lot of these car shows on the web where people, they have a barn find where they find an old Camaro from 1968, and then, oh, it has rust, and they dismantle everything and they put things together again, and then it's as good as new, and they sell it for 100 grand. So that sort of inspired me to show you this particular thing, because what we did was we made some bold decisions and we stripped stuff away because we had a good idea. And what we're going to talk about is that good idea. So if I go with this analogy just a little bit further, the engine that we have is really, really simple. And the engine of this platform is Power Effects. And that's why I included this, because there was the engine part, and that's invariantly Power Effects. So I want you to keep this image in mind just for a few more minutes as we go through the rest of the slides. Next slide, please. So here is the big defining moment where we get to talk about the idea that's going to make everything that we're going to talk about here possible. What we did was, instead of having a test engine that knows something about a particular thing, like Canvas apps in our case, what we did was we strapped things down to the bare minimum, which is the frame you just saw. Then on top of that, we have an extension story, an extensibility model based on that. So what really an extension is really a mapping from the Power Effects functions, the Power Effects engine, now has new verbs, new functions that it can execute that work over the domain that we're trying to test. So that is the key insight that I want you to remember, is that there is an extensibility model, and it works by plugging it in, and then there's magic that happens. I can talk about how it works with it, MEF, the Microsoft Extensibility Framework, and all that, but those are technical details. but it will actually provide a new set of PowerFX functions that you can use inside the context of the YAML file that I just showed you. So just as you in the previous slide, you had something where you checked for a value for the label text field, I think it was, right? Then you will have a different model where you can test for different things that are in the problem domain against which you want to test.
Hey, Peter, it looks like we have a hand up. Maybe a good time to pause and let
Let's do it.
Stephen ask a question.
Let's do it, Steve. Go ahead. Stephen, go ahead.
Or Stephen, was that an unintentional hand raise? It happens sometimes.
Yeah, sorry, I had no idea what I did there.
Okay, no worries. We'll go ahead and put your hand down. No worries. Keep going, Peter.
Yeah, no worries at all. So we sort of reached this consensus that this was what we're going to do after sort of thinking a little bit more broadly about the scenarios that we wanted to satisfy. And we as a small team have this problem that we cannot satisfy all requirements that everybody has. What we need to do is to build a story where people can come and say, I have this requirement, and then we can guide them to say, oh, that's easy. All you need to do is implement this particular interface, and then it'll just work. Now you can provide your test story against your problem domain just by implementing these 5 functions in this interface. It's a brilliant idea, mainly also because it provides that story for others to be able to build extensions. That is the key insight that I want you to have here. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So as you go about using the test engine as it stands today, you will notice a thing that I'm not happy with at all, which is that the current model has a name password authentication scheme that requires you to actually store in clear text on your machine in environment variables, names, and passwords. And that's not professional. That's not the thing that we want, obviously. And how are we going to solve that problem? Well, from everything that I have said so far, the answer should jump to mind immediately, right? Remember that yellow light bulb we had a few slides back? We are going to do that by providing an extensibility model for the authentication as well. So we will have several modes of authentication, from a simple one, which is just called local, where it just sort of returns true, and then all the way up to certificate-based, Entra ID-based authentication models that are useful for companies like Microsoft and many other financial institutions, stuff like that, who have much more complicated and secure authentication models. So that's also definitely an area of focus for us right now, an important one, I would say. So we'll use that extensibility model here as well. Next slide, please. So let's go over what we will actually be doing. So in the next few months. First of all, we will be adding support for Playwright. And that means that we will have verbs in PowerFX that allow us to integrate with the raw site that we are targeting, which means that any website at all can be tested with this particular framework. And this is actually remember that Marc said that he had been messing around with this to try to create a demo and so on. This is exactly what that demo is about. So we have that already, and we are integrating that into the main branch at soon. But that's sort of the crux, the most basic thing that you can do, where you can have these accessors in Playwright that actually go and fetches details about how things are, or the object model, I should say, of the website under test. And also in that, we will be able to actually execute C# snippets, which is interesting as well, because now we have taken the next step where it's a no cliffs sort of environment where you can start with your PowerFX, but using this, you have the Power Pro Developer escape hatch, where you can actually execute snippets of C# code. We're done with this. We have developed it, and we're happy with that for now. The next thing we're going to do, the next thing that people have been asking for very loudly, and this has been the case for a year now, is that it's all good and nice with Canvas apps, but Canvas apps don't scale very well. I mean, you can develop simple Canvas apps, But once you get into more complex situations where you need to bind towards data in a more important way, then that model sort of falls apart and you need to do too much work. And that's why we have the concept of model-driven apps, where basically you say, this is the data that I'm going to test against. It builds the UI for you beautifully, by the way. It's really well done. It's really professional. But we want to be able to test those as well. And the story for how we're going to do that remains the same as for everything else we've been talking about. We're building an extension that knows about the model-driven apps. We're going to define specific verbs, as we call them, which are just power effects functions that allow you to do stuff inside the model-driven app and sample values so that you can test against them. Then we're going to add support for Copilot because we want this to be a story that is so easy to use that nobody has an excuse not to use it. So we don't want to just enable the pro developers. We want to enable everybody, even the makers. So if anyone is able to say in natural language what their test against this app, what they want to test, then Copilot should generate behind the scenes the YAML for that. And we're going to see that in a few minutes, a few seconds maybe. We also want to support Power Pages, which is something that is near and dear to Marc, as you may know from his previous work. We have the whole set of Power Star that we want to work with. Another one is Power Automate. And we want to build, as I said, these several, and we need to integrate this into pipelines as well, so that you can put this in your pipeline, and if a test fails, then the commit is aborted, so that you never get something into your repo that doesn't work, right? So that's sort of one of the main reasons we have this. One of the things that I'm really interested in is building something for Power Automate for desktop. Now, this is one of the only things that I think our organization has, which is underhyped. This is really, really an interesting product because it allows you to test or automate, in this particular case, any app at all, Excel, blah, blah, whatever it is. And this allows me to make an interesting point because tests today, we should not think of them being isolated to a particular machine or a particular thing. These days, apps are not like that. Apps today are things that reach out to services that run in the cloud. They are things that spark off Power Automate flows. They do many, many different things. And we want to have a test surface that allows us to do all of that. And Power Automate for desktop is the final frontier against that, because there you will be able to test results for anything. You will be able to say, this particular app, I'm going to put in the values here. Then I'm going to take the result from there. I'm going to paste it into my bespoke Excel sheet, press the calculate button, and then I'm going to sample a cell in the Excel. And then I'm going to assert that that value is equal to what I thought. So now I have involved Excel also in my test. And maybe as part of the test, I don't know, I will write an email, or I'll do a Word document, or whatever it is. It's not for me to decide. What I need to do is to provide an avenue so that you can automate all these things and test that the results are what you expect.
All right, Peter, you asked me to tell you when you're about to get the hook. We need to get to the AMA soon.
Got it. All right. So next slide, please. There you go. So let me just see. Can I take over the screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So here we go. And this, oh, of course it's signed out. Sorry. Let me provide my ultra secret password here. There. Okay, so let's show a little prototype for that. So let's say that I provide this natural language. Create a test called myTest that opens the My App application, sets the value, blah, blah, then click the calculate button and check that and so on, right? So what this would do, it would reach out to Copilot or to ChatGPT, whatever it is, and it would generate this particular piece of code. And let's take a look at what these test steps look like. So you open the My App, which is what you have up here. You set this thing to 34, and then you click the calculate button. And then you set this property year born to this, and then I don't have an assertion in there, by the way. Has the value, oh, it should put in an assertion here. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, and then you can, have a conversational thing here where you say, you see that it uses Chromium. So I want to say use the Edge browser. And then, of course, it'll create the same thing, but it will include Edge here as the browser that's being used. So hang on, let's get back. Take over again, if you don't mind.
Right on. Just a second. All right, there we go.
Okay, goody. All right, next slide, please. I know that we're in a little bit of. So let me just end with this, and then I'll open up for all the questions afterwards. So we've talked a lot about what we will do and what we have done and so on. So what will you do? I mean, that's as important, right? Or should be to you. You should build extensions for testing whatever it is that's important to you. So here I have this thing with a robot that's taking stuff up and so on. I can imagine that if you own a situation like that, you would build an extension that has verbs like pick up and go to aisle, where you give it an aisle number and a slot number, and then deposit and so on. And then you would assert that after the deposit, the actual package with the RFID that you gave it would actually be positioned the same place. And you would have your RFID readers on the shelves and the robots and all that stuff. And then you would build simply an extension that would allow you to test that as if it was child's play with PowerFX. So that's the kind of extensibility and the kind of thing that we have enabled with the test engine extensibility model. With that, I'll stop, Mark. It's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. All right, so now we are hitting the AMA part. I will remind people you can either scan this QR code, you can go to either of these aka.ms links, aka.ms/powerama/prodev, or you can just go into aka.ms/powerama and punch in the code 3059. If somebody can maybe drop that into the group chat as well as I transition over, that would be awesome. So people who don't quite grab it in time can grab it from the chat. All right, so let's go to the AMA tool. And last time I accidentally was dismissing certain questions without answering them, so I apologize. First question, can you automate the import of an Azure Synapse link for Dataverse from a managed solution into the environment? Otherwise, it'll always be a manual action. So I did have to hunt down an answer to the question. And the short answer today is no, you cannot. And the best guidance right now should be on this link right here. So, oops, come on. There we go. And I'll drop this into the chat. I have certainly provided the feedback to the team that is the product manager would be responsible for improving this experience. But the short answer today is unfortunately no. There you go. Full screen this so it's easier for people to see. I'm going to go back to my question. So I'll mark that as archived. The next one, I'll pin it. Is there a place where I can see how this site, this site is made? I see this as a Power Pages site with a single page application routing, and I'm curious how it was implemented. So I checked in with the Power Pages team. The short answer is no, this site that we use is not available publicly as a sample. But the Pages team did say if there's enough interest, they will be happy to come maybe to one of the upcoming office hours and provide a little bit of an explanation of how it was authored. The answer is a little bit more involved and there's some nuance to how it was built, but they certainly appreciate people's interest in it and will try to figure out a way to share how it was built with the world. So folks who want to build something like this themselves can without having to reinvent the wheel. My multi-monitor setup's a little wonky, so give me a second. Should have turned my camera back on. Can you include the correct version numbers of apps from the Power Apps for Makers connector instead of using date values? The field in the connector is called version, yet the value is a date field. And I'm going to look at I didn't get an answer on this one, so I'll have to hunt down. I don't know if Chris, if you're on the call, or anybody from Connectors or Power Automate that might have some visibility and understanding with this issue. If you're there, feel free to come off mute. If not, I'll go ahead and move on to the next question, and I'll keep this one up, but I won't keep it pinned. So I'll pin the next one. Can Power Platform pipelines be enhanced with the faster update rather than the slower but reliable upgrade method? And it looks like Casey's on the call. Casey, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so some good news on this actually. So this is actually a thing of the past. Upgrade is just as fast as update now. So I think Scott Duro, you just did an interview with Shan on that recently, right?
Yeah,
that's right. I'll put a link actually into the chat.
And I'm
Thanks,
here
Scott.
too, Casey.
Oh, awesome. Shan's here. Yeah, he can talk to it way more than I can.
So we've got two upgrade patterns. We have the stage and upgrade, and then the holding pattern upgrade. The holding pattern upgrade is the slow one. The stage and upgrade is the faster one. That should be just as fast as an update. And the pipeline system is already using that. So that's something that's coming soon to a geo near you. So you should see it. You'll be able to do continuous upgrade, and it should be just as fast as an update.
Awesome. Thank you, Shan. All right, let's archive that one. And I'm going to pin the next one. The .NET build command doesn't pack the Canvas app. It uses the MS-app file within the solution to build the solution. Currently, we have to use the solution pack command to pack the Canvas app. Are there any plans to build Canvas app as well as use the .NET build command? So I would say pay attention to build. We've got some announcements coming about Canvas YAML and the notion of having to pack and unpack Canvas apps to get a source code format. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with some of what we're sharing, but to not steal the thunder of the build conference, I'm going to leave it at that and ask you to, if it's not clear after the build conference and some of the announcements we make, feel free to come back next month and ask clarifying questions. All right. In this one, why the SQL Server connections are breaking while deployment of solutions. So this is one of those that's tough to answer. There's, questions like this don't give us enough detail. I would say if you have SQL connections breaking with the deployment of solutions, you probably want to, call support. And if anybody on the call has submitted this question, feel free to share more details. But this sounds like one of those that we'd rather direct you to support, because this is not something we can just broadly answer without understanding your particular scenario, given the sort of high level nature of the question. All right, so next one. How do we get the information of even small product group updates? So as it pertains to professional developer related topics, one of our goals with this office hours is fundamentally to provide a forum for that. So one of our goals is every month to share updates, whether it's doc updates, release updates, et cetera. Generally things that are top of mind we're sharing, and then also provide a forum for people to ask questions. And so if we miss something, those of you in the community, if you notice we missed something, put a statement instead of question in the AMA tool and say, hey, can you talk about this new thing that I noticed you released? And we'd be happy to do that as well. And of course, we make lots of document updates on a daily basis, but this is one of the goals is for this to serve as a forum for that. All right.
Yeah, Mark, can I add a little bit
Absolutely,
more?
Go for it, Andrew.
Many product groups are also active on GitHub. We go daily to GitHub discussions, issues. So feel free to post your questions on GitHub as well. And we'll.
Right on. Can you clarify why Microsoft will block unmanaged solutions from production environments in 24 months or less? Why can't we leave that open if companies internally want to keep their internal systems unmanaged due to the dependency issues that managed solutions cause? Why limit users and developers? We understand managed solutions if you develop solutions that will be installed by clients' customers, but if keeping things internal, let us keep them unmanaged if we choose to. I know this was from last AMA, and Shan had written down a really good answer to this, but Shan, you're on the call. So you want to take this one?
That's a long one to unpack, and I'd be happy to have side conversations with that. But the bottom line is that when you're building a solution, you're building in the active layer or the unmanaged layer. We're going to be persisting that to source control. You're going to see some more content after build as well on this. But while you're building it, you're working the unmanaged solution. When you deploy it to another environment, you deploy it as managed, so you can service and support it, i.e. upgrade and delete it. That's the design, and that's how everything in solutions is built, and that's how all of our ALM tooling is going to go. It has never been an intention to make it as a choice to customers. Oh, I want to choose to deploy unmanaged solutions to my production environment versus managed, and there's benefits and pros of both. That's never been the choice. We also recognize, though, that there are some struggles that customers have. So things like the dependencies and things like that. We're working actually on how to reduce those issues so that you don't have those struggles and that you don't perceive the choice being the thing that is what you need as relief. So you should see improvements in the dependency experiences, isolated solutions, which will come down fairly soon as well, which will make it so you don't have those issues that you might be struggling with today, given unhealthy standards. All of our ALM investments today are going towards how do we keep you on a healthy path for by default and throughout your experience, so that you don't struggle with these things. And you'll start to see that our source control integrations and stuff like that, you're only going to have one flavor of a solution. It's not managed or unmanaged. It's just that it's your solution. But while you're working on it in the dev environment, it's unmanaged. And while you've deployed it to another target environment, it's managed. That way you can uninstall it and you can service and support it as an upgrade.
Thanks, Shan. Appreciate it.
But we have no intention of removing anything, but we are definitely doubling and tripling down on the investments to make it healthy and easy for customers to achieve their success.
Awesome. Thanks, Shan. Can there be any improvements to pack Power Pages commands, mainly for the deployment of Power Pages configurations into the other environments? So I would say this is a generic question, and if you put pack Power Pages, you put any other Microsoft product, the general answer is, yeah, of course there can be improvements. I think what we need from the folks who ask questions like this is be more granular on the specific scenarios and improvements you're looking for, and definitely encourage you to go to the appropriate GitHub repos, right? Get your, start a discussion, get your peers to engage in the discussion, vote up, enhancement requests, et cetera. But there's not a lot we can do with such a generic question. So the more you can get granular on specifics and help us prioritize the kinds of enhancements you're looking for, that would really be helpful. All right, I'm going to skip that one and pin this one. Can the Power Platform CLI tools, such as the configuration migration tool, et cetera, be implemented in Power Apps Maker Portal for a first-class experience where everything is available in one place? And I'm guessing also, to an extent, as web-based, so you don't have to install client tools, right? Is probably, I'll read into that one as well. I mean, again, the simple answer to this is, can it be done? Yes. If you look at configuration migration tool, it's a pretty complex tool, and so there's a fair amount of effort to port configuration migration tool into a web-based utility. We don't have any plans to do that as of now, but I think this is another example. If folks could go to our GitHub discussions, right, put that there, let's engage in a conversation, let's see how much demand there is from how, and how many customers are interested in these kind of scenarios. And this is exactly the kind of feedback that we're looking for, because the beautiful thing about software is that everybody's got backlogs. The unfortunate thing about software is you can't do everything on your backlog, right? And one of the hardest things in software is figuring out what to prioritize. And so help us with that, and we'll continue to listen to the feedback. All right, let's mark that one. Pin, since the ALM accelerator is no longer adding new features, what should be the plan if the team wants to do source control in the future of Power Platform? I'm going to say, ask that question after build.
I was gonna say, dude, go to build.
Right. Pay attention to the build conference, come back and give us feedback on what you see at build. I
think we should also give some visibility that we're going to protect our customers that are using the ALM accelerator and moving on to in-platform ALM as well, so that customers that are there are not going to be left behind.
Yeah. So just so folks, some of you may or may not know this, but I actually created the ALM accelerator as a incubation project, and then it was something that my old team used internally for our own ALM. And then at some point, we just decided to share it with the world and make it an accelerator, and then it got improved over time based on customer feedback. When we set out to build it originally, it was always with the hope that someday the ALM accelerator would no longer be necessary. I'm actually pretty proud to say that we're getting to that world. But to Shan's point, When I say that, I mean the roadmap we have within the product group to continuously improve in the ALM space, right? We're getting to a world where having to roll your own and do a bunch of the kinds of things you would have to do in something like the ALM accelerator yourself is becoming less and less necessary. And to Shan's point, right, as customers start to see the options that you have to take more advantage of in-product experiences to solve these problems versus putting a lot of effort into rolling your own solutions or using open source reference implementations, certainly we will continue to help customers understand how they can get from what they used to do to taking advantage of the latest and greatest native capabilities in the platform. All right. How about deploying Power BI reports with a solution? Shan, do you happen to have any insight on what the latest is with the preview feature that allows you to deploy Power BI reports with solutions?
It's on hold at the stage where
Okay.
It wasn't prioritized for this semester. They know what they're going to do, and we know where the work is going to have to be done, but it's just not on the roadmap for this semester yet. But it's going to come up after that.
Okay. Yeah. So if those of you who aren't familiar, there is a preview, and if somebody on the call happens to have the blog post or the links handy, that would be awesome. There is a feature in preview that allows you to put Power BI reports in solutions. There, as with preview features, there are certain things that we've heard customer feedback on that they'd like to see improved before it becomes a GA feature, and that's kind of what Shan is referring to. All right, time check. Please explain the architecture behind cloud flows. If they are not part of a solution in an environment with a database, where are they stored? Hey, Chris Gardy, I'm going to give it a shot at a high level. And if you're on the call and you want to chime in, just let me know, or anybody else from the Power Automate team. So at a high level, it's not just cloud flows that are in solutions, but aren't necessarily running within quote unquote Dataverse, right? Dataverse is the ALM engine for the Power Platform. But whether it's a Canvas app, it's a Power Automate flow, and it's many other things that are packaged and deployed with solutions. There is, and I'm going to oversimplify this, there is this large, for lack of a better term, microservices architecture behind the Power Platform that when you deploy with a solution, the solution infrastructure sends all of these different things to different, compute running across this large Azure infrastructure. And so to answer the latter question, they are stored in Dataverse, but then they are propagated out to the Power Automate runtime. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Power Automate is fundamentally a low-code layer on top of Logic Apps, right? So they actually run within Azure Logic Apps. It's just our Azure Logic Apps subscription that we host, and it was our Azure Logic Apps compute, which we host and run in our own subscription, and we put a low-code convenience layer over Logic Apps to make what we call Power Automate and integrate with solutions for ALM, et cetera. So that's my best attempt at answering that question. If anybody else on the call wants to chime in, feel free. How does the T2T migration work? I'm guessing you're asking tenant to tenant migration. What assets are not supported for migration? Are only solution-aware components supported? Is there a way to map connection references and resource references to external systems as part of the process? I know what T2T is, but I am not a subject matter expert on the tenant-to-tenant migration effort. I don't know if anyone on this call is, and I'm going to put you on the spot, Shan, because I'm guessing you're probably the most familiar.
Oh, not really.
Okay, I guess wrong then. All right, so yeah,
there's a documented list. I'm not sure if it got corrected, but there were some gaps as far as what's not supported for tenant-to-tenant migration. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, though. It's like Canvas apps, cloud flows, all types of Canvas components, connectors. It's a pretty lengthy list, so kind of proceed with caution on that one. Support also has all the details too for when folks are trying to do the migration. But yeah, I'll ping the PM owner on that again too, just to make sure we have the right information publicly.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey. Right. I'm going to mark that as answered. And in this one, is there anything on the roadmap for ALM specifically around the initial creation of connections, not connection references, within X environment? So first question, is there anything on the ALM roadmap? I think there's lots on the ALM roadmap, some of which will come out at Build. Shan, Casey, Marcel, myself, I'm looking, Andrew, lots of us are all on what we sort of collectively call the ALMV team internally here at Microsoft. And we've got, I would say, we've got ideas for many years to come to improve ALM. But in the short term, you'll hear some of the improvements at Build, specifically around the initial creation of connections. One of the things that we have in PAC CLI is the sort of, it only supports Dataverse connections right now, is the ability to programmatically create Dataverse connections and create connections with service principals. There is, we certainly know that people want to be able to automate the creation of connections, especially service principal connections, in a headless way. It's an understood scenario. I just don't know if we have anybody on the connectors team that can talk about where we are on the roadmap with that. But I don't think that there's anything that I can share publicly, other than yes, we're aware of the ask, and it's something that the teams have certainly talked about. Shan, Casey, I don't know if I got that right, but
I don't have anything else to add to that right now.
All right, cool. That was my best answer. The best non-answer. All right. Should we expect better pro code development tools in the near future? So that's a bit of a loaded question. I mean, certainly I think the answer is yes. My team, Andrew, Marcel, not my team, our team, builds all the pro dev tools, or most of them, or contributes to many of them. And certainly we are trying to continually improve those tools, but candidly, a lot of the tools have reached a level of maturity where we're not throwing as many resources on those tools as we perhaps have in the past. I think what will help us, as you see some of the announcements at Build, you will certainly see an opportunity for tooling improvement that aligns with some of those announcements that we have in mind. But I think what would help us is for folks, if you go to PAC CLI, for example, and you just type PAC, you will see a link that says feedback. Click on this link. It's the Power Platform Build Tools GitHub repo. I really ask people to give us more specific asks, because make it better is really a really hard requirement to address in the history of software development, because every time you try to make something better and it wasn't what the person asked because you didn't know what they specifically asked, you don't make it better for them. So give us specifics. Let us know what those better, or those enhancements and improvements are, and we will certainly take them under consideration. Right. We are running close to time. We got about 2 minutes left, so we'll probably get through a question or two. What's the pro dev story for catalog, or catalog for Power Platform? Is it a thing that should be part of CI/CD ALM stuff, or just a tool we choose to use? What is preferred in terms of Microsoft's side of pro devs? Well, so I always hesitate to represent Microsoft. There's Microsoft is a company of individuals, right? And even two people at Microsoft often disagree on what the best way to do something is. And so generally speaking, for catalog, yes, you can deploy catalog with PAC CLI. I have Azure DevOps pipelines in some of our tenants that, after we use pipelines for Power Platform and deploy to a production environment, which is sort of a holding environment for something we want to send to catalog, then we deploy to catalog. We run test engine tests to then testing the deployment from catalog to an environment we spin up, run test engine tests to validate it, deployed, it's got the sample data that's supposed to be there, et cetera, and then approve the catalog submission. So there certainly is a dev story for catalog and ways to do ALM and automation and deploying things and approving things to catalog. Candidly, we haven't documented any of this, and it's something that we probably should. And I will put it on my to-do list to try to build some docs that help people understand some of these scenarios, but we certainly do it internally ourselves when we use catalog in some of our tenants. With that, I think we're at time. So I want to thank everyone.